Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to As I Live and Grieve. How y'all doing? Hope it was a decent week for you. It was a really good week for me, and I love it when those weeks are good. I know, I say it every week. I got some great guests, and you're going to love this conversation. With me today is Corey and Katie, and I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves. Corey, Katie, welcome.
Thank you. We are excited to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. Would you just start out by telling our listeners a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. Yeah. So Katie and I are both widowed. I lost my spouse, Kris, about 6 years ago, coming up on 7 years. And she had pancreatic cancer. It was about 16 months or so from diagnosis until she passed away. I have 4 children with Kris, 3 daughters and 1 son, and 3 of them are married. And since Kris has passed away, we've got 1 grandchild that has joined the fold, and we just found out that we're going to be having another one.
Number
so
2.
We are super excited about that.
Yeah, and I'm Katie, and my husband, David, also passed away from pancreatic cancer about 2 months before Kris passed away.
Oh.
He was diagnosed 7 months before he died, so he didn't have quite enough, the same amount of time. But when he was diagnosed, he was given 6 to 8 weeks if he did nothing, and 7 to 9 months if he took the treatment. And he chose the time, and I'm very grateful because we did take the time to prepare. Yeah, I have 3 sons with my husband, Dave, and blending has been a really interesting process, but I'm
like
grateful.
The Brady Bunch.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Because I have 3 boys and
Yeah.
he has 3 girls, and they're kind of the same age. Mine are a little bit older.
The Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now grandchildren in the mix too. That's great. Now the 2 of you together have formed a company to talk about, at least initially, preparing for the end of your life. And I've mentioned once or twice on the podcast before about my mother who, she was so detail-oriented that even on every single knick-knack in her china cabinet, on the bottom, she put a little Post-it note with the name of the person in the family who it was supposed to go to.
Wow.
Now, sad to say, when it came time to divvy all those things up, they didn't want them.
Right.
So, unfortunately, for all that work she did. But part of what she did, and one of the greatest things she ever did for me, though I didn't know it at the time, and used to literally run from discussions about it, she prepared for the end of her life. She went to a funeral director. She purchased her casket. She paid for her ceremony. She even had the detail, the agenda outlined. You know, 1 evening of calling hours. Forget the afternoon. That's too much stress on the family. And yes, she included notes. There were notes that the funeral director read to me that were from my mother. So it actually, on that day, I can remember it brought a smile to my face because it was the standard discussion in the family about how prepared and how detail-oriented my mother was. But when it came right to it, it just made everything at that very devastating time in my life, it made it so much easier for me because she had made all those arrangements. Those decisions were made. On the opposite end of the spectrum was my husband, who, even though he had 8 months to think about knowing that he was going to die from a terminal form of brain cancer that was very aggressive, no cure, he refused to talk about or discuss anything. I didn't even have verbal decisions from him, nothing. So I had to go through all of that, and it made those days even more devastating to have to go through those conversations. and those thoughts and those decisions.
Yeah, that's exactly why we decided to do this. We have a support group that we are in, and we talk with them and read their posts and all the things. And there were so many that had your same situation.
Yeah.
And so we discovered that the grieving process is almost directly correlated to how well you are prepared or not.
Or not prepared. It definitely is. Definitely is.
I mean, and we believe that grief is really important experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important human experience. And we feel like you shouldn't have to have it delayed
mm-hmm.
because of all the logistics.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of difficulty when you have delayed grief. So, I mean, God bless your mother. I mean, she is our poster child.
She could be. She could be. Yeah. And I remember after my husband Tom died, I felt like a private detective.
Right.
Because, in fact, because of my efforts as a private detective, I found out that he had a life insurance policy I never even knew existed.
Oh, man.
Never even knew I existed. But it was because I was watching the mail that was coming.
Right.
And instead of just assuming that something was a piece of junk mail, I opened everything.
It's so smart.
And there was that policy. And I wound up 3 weeks later getting a check for $15,000.
Wow.
That otherwise would have, who knows where it would have gone, you know? So at what point in our lives, and I know this is kind of a tricky question and there is no right answer, when do you suggest we start thinking about the end of life and making those decisions for ourselves so that others won't have to?
Well,
what time is it?
It sounds like a trick question, but the correct answer is now.
Yeah, now.
Yeah, it's now. Just because there's so many things that can happen that will change your life and take it in a mm-hmm. different direction that you're not expecting. And oftentimes in the planning of your end of life preparations, so much of what you do and how you do it and how you plan for your survivors' benefit is influenced by what's happening now. You know, for example, I like to run and I listen to running podcasts, and one of the podcasters that I listen to quite often just was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she's a young mother, has a little girl, and I don't know her preparation plans. I don't know if she has life insurance or not, but the immediate thought that I had was, I hope she has life insurance, because from this point on, she's not going to be able to get it. Or what she can get will be very minimal. Just because of that diagnosis. All of a sudden, that is off the table.
Right. Pre-existing condition and right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, you gotta act now while everything is good as it can be, and make your plans now, and, you know, not knowing what the future's going to hold.
And are they just financial decisions?
Oh, no.
Yeah, definitely not. In fact, one of the reasons that we created this company is because in our conversations with a lot of people, one of the obstacles people have in preparing is they just don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. Okay. And so we tried to sort of organize it into a kind of a systematic process. And so we've categorized everything into 4 categories. Financial, certainly a big one. Legal is a big part of it too. And then there's also kind of the mental, emotional, spiritual side. And then there's just the practical side, just learning how to live on your own when you've had a partner that has supported you and just running a household.
Yeah, we believe that it's, we take our clients for about 4 months, 3 to 4 months. And we take one of these pillars of preparation 1 month at a time. And so we give you homework, and we make sure that if you say you're going to have an appointment with your attorney, we will call you the next week. Did you make your appointment with your attorney? So it's not so much, it is education. I mean, there's so much stuff on the internet. There's so much stuff. Right. And we have taken the time to filter out what you really need. Mm-hmm. And so that you don't have to do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we take this time to tell you what you need to do. We give you checklists, and then we keep you is accountable the right word? We cheerlead you. We help you. We encourage you because we want so much for this to be done. So that monkey is off your back and you can go live your life, knowing that when you die, not if, but when, the people who will have to deal with all your nonsense will know what to do. And like you said, you don't want to have to force somebody else to make those choices. Those are unconscionable choices. So if you make them yourself, what a gift that is to your survivors.
It is. I can't say enough about that. Now, you mentioned the internet. So I know that somebody somewhere, probably plural somebodies, somewhere is going to say, well, yeah, I can find everything I need to know on the internet. But you can, but you have to know what you're looking for.
Right.
And that's why to come to a company such as yours and get that guidance, I guess, would make things so much easier. My daughter and I talk about rabbit holes all the time. We go on the internet to find one thing, and before you know it, we're 6 subjects in the other direction just because of the websites we've gone to. Not only that, but some of the websites out there do not have accurate information.
Correct.
And information can also be different by state, can't it?
Yes.
Yep.
That's true.
Yep. And one of the things that we find, I don't know what it is about the male gender, but we find that the men, I said it because I can, because I'm a man. But for some reason, we seem to be the most stubborn about this. We've had some families that have come to us, specifically the ladies that have come to us and said, I'm worried. My husband's the breadwinner, and I bring in a little on my side job, but not as much, and I don't know what to do if something should happen to him. And when they talk about it as a couple, the husband's the one's like, this is all out there. We don't need to pay somebody to do this. And, we're looking at it from, okay, you've been married for 30 years and it's all out there. So why haven't you done it?
Yeah.
Let us help you. We'll take it. We'll get you through this in 4 months.
Right.
Yeah. We can get it done. No kidding, in 4 months.
Yeah. Now, I will say that just recently I went to take care of all of this for my daughters. And just the attorney process has been about a 4-month process.
Yeah.
I still have more to do, but I got that piece done and I feel really good about it. So that's the other piece to it. Once you do accomplish some of that, you'll feel good.
Yes.
You'll feel, okay, that's done. I've taken care of that so that my girls don't have to go through that piece.
Right.
It's going to be hard enough for them once I go.
Right.
But I know dozens and dozens of people out there that haven't done it, and they still have children that would be fostered out.
Yeah.
If they don't clarify
That's right.
who is to be guardians for their children.
That's
so
right.
in that respect, especially, money's money, whatever. But if you have children, most certainly you need to take care of that. Don't want them to become wards of the state. I can't emphasize that enough.
Right.
Yeah. When you think about end of life planning, I think in most people's minds, you jump to your own end of life, and it's just trying to make it easy and not be a burden on anybody in that dying process. But the reality is, all of this end of life planning isn't for you; it's for those that are left behind. It's the survivors, and it's really a token of love for your survivors that you go through the process and just make sure that they have everything that they need once you're gone.
Right, right.
And I think we're so afraid. We are so afraid of these discussions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy because it's an absolute. It's not like, oh, maybe if. No, maybe if.
It's the only guarantee of life is that we're going to die.
That's exactly right. And I think once you start having these discussions, you realize the fear of the discussion is way scarier than the actual discussion.
Yeah.
So when my husband was sick, and when you get a diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, like you pretty much know.
Oh, sure.
There's a 1 or 2% chance that you will live beyond 3 years. Well, my husband he was like, I'm that 1%. I absolutely am. I mean, he lifted 2-pound weights, like he did whatever he had to do. It was kind of inspiring. But, so I had to be very careful about saying, okay, I know you're going to survive, but just in case, please let me know, like, who am I supposed to call? Who are your HR people? And once that discussion was open, I mean, he was on it. Like, we had really deep, meaningful discussions, probably deeper and more meaningful than we had previous.
Yeah.
And it was so great. And I learned things about him that I didn't realize. We had really kind of helpful conversations about what he believed, what his values were, what he thought was going to happen next, which, I thought I knew. But after he passed away, knowing that information was like, so helpful in my grief process, knowing that he was peaceful about it.
Right.
And just having those conversations, it was so bonding. We got even closer.
I'll bet. My husband wouldn't even, if I started a conversation, he would just stop it, even if he had to pretend to be asleep. But, I mean, with the meds he was taking, maybe he was. Right. I don't know. But still, there was just no discussing at all. And that kind of gave me a feeling what my mother must have felt like when she wanted to discuss it, because I wasn't having any of that.
Right.
Now, you mentioned 4 different facets of preparation. You mentioned the legal, we all figure that out. The financial, we can all understand what that is. You mentioned spiritual. Now, why do people need to be guided for the spiritual aspect of it? Don't they either know or not know what they believe?
You'd think.
Yeah, and it's not so much knowing any specific thing. Everybody thinks a little bit differently about what spiritual means. Is there another world? Is there another life after this? Are we reincarnated? Lots of different opinions and ideas, and it's not so much about trying to steer anybody into one line of thinking, as much as it is just preparing on sort of whatever your spiritual beliefs are, whether it's a belief in God or whether it's just a belief in Mother Nature and
you'll be one with the universe again,
one with the whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you. Just having some time to kind of talk through and to think about how that will impact you on a spiritual and an emotional and a mental level is kind of where we take you in this process.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, even though my husband and I are of a specific faith community, and we believed what we were taught and all those things. But when you're faced with it, it's like, what do I really think about this?
Right.
And he wasn't sure. And that surprised me. Because he was very faithful. But in the end, just the fact that we talked about, like, what are his values? Like, what is meaningful to him? And how did he feel like he lived his life? Was he peaceful about how he lived his life? And that, in the end, is what gave him peace, is knowing that he was a good guy. And he knew he was a good guy. And so, like, I have 3 sons who have no interest in our faith community at all. But we've still talked about, okay, well, what do you think about your end of life? What do you think about, and the fact that they have an opinion and they feel peaceful about that gives me peace.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, that certainly clarifies.
I will say that this pillar, as we call it, stems both from the experiences Katie and I had. I had the opposite experience as Katie in terms of conversation with Kris. I wasn't even brave enough to try and bring this up with her after she was diagnosed, because I didn't want her to lose the faith in me that I was believing that she could be that 1%.
Okay.
And I'm sure she didn't want to bring it up with me because she didn't want to scare me and scare the kids. And so we didn't have any of those conversations. But there was one moment where it was kind of later in her diagnosis. It was getting close to when she passed away, that our palliative care team came in during a doctor's visit. And thankfully, one of the palliative care team members was very blunt and literally asked her, "How do you feel about dying?" And I about fell off my chair because I kind of wanted to know, but I was afraid to ask her.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure really what her response was going to be. But the way she responded, she said, "You know what?" She said, "I'm at peace with all of this. I know what I believe about what's going to happen. My kids are going to throw a big party for me and they'll be fine. And so I feel really good and peaceful." And I just cannot tell you just how much comfort that gave me after she passed away, is just knowing that she died being at peace with the whole process.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're trying to hope, what we're trying to accomplish with this idea of preparing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Right. At least you can remove that stress of it, so you don't get to the last little bit of your life and all of a sudden have all these decisions to make.
Right.
They've already been made. And certainly you can change your mind if you need to.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, the fourth one you mentioned was, and I'm
Practical.
not sure how you word it, but practical.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, you are coaching and helping people prepare for the end of their life.
Mm-hmm.
So once they're finished, do you have any continuity? Do you kind of watch out for and support the people they leave behind?
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that for us, it's not really preparing somebody to die. It's preparing the survivors to live. That's really the mentality and the approach that we're trying to take.
I like that.
And
That's a
the
much
practical
more positive spin.
And the practical side of it really is just everything on the day-to-day living. Take out all the grief, take out all the legal and the financial aspects of all this. It's just everyday living. Who's going to get the kids to school? Who's going to do the grocery shopping? Who's going to cook the meals? Who pays the bills? Who tracks the insurance to make sure we're properly covered? All of those just normal, everyday kind of living things. Because typically, especially in a marriage, you've got two people that are sharing responsibilities, right? And when suddenly one of them is not around and not available, then you've got a bunch of tasks or projects that either go undone, or you got to hire somebody else to do it, or you got to figure out, okay, I'm just going to learn this and figure out how to do it. And so that's what that's all about, is just trying to get you prepared to understand, okay, what does my spouse do that I can't do or don't know how to do? And is there anything I can do now to be ready in case I have to suddenly have to do it?
Yeah. And again, speaking from experience, fortunately for Tom and I was the one that paid the bills. So that piece of it was just, I just carried over and, kept paying the bills. But had I not known that, just based on how he did things, I wouldn't have had a clue where the money was even. I'm not sure I would have known what bank account, or what bank or banks had our money.
Yeah.
But at least that piece was resolved for me. But it was probably, 7 or 8 months later, I got up one day, sipping my coffee, and all of a sudden I thought, I bet I have to change the filter in the furnace.
Right. Yeah.
Who knew?
Right.
I had no idea. At least I knew where the furnace was. But we also had other issues. We were in a mobile home, and I know that there was heat tape wrapped around the pipes underneath, but I didn't know if that had to be turned on or plugged in, or so there. Even months later, all of these issues suddenly came to me that I don't know how to do this. I have nothing, no clue at all. So I had to find somebody that could help me figure it out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these little details.
Yeah.
And even if you can just wean a few of them away, it's going to make your life that much less complex.
That's
so kudos to you guys for realizing that there's more to it than just, all the paperwork. There's more to it. There's living as a part of it too.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
Nice. And so as I recall now, you have a special event coming up. So I think it's about time. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the microphone over to the two of you, and you've got to solid 5 minutes, if you want it all,
Okay.
to tell people how they can reach you. Tell them about your website. Tell them, I think you might have some information about a book coming up, about
Mhm.
a conference. Tell them everything you want to tell them, and it's your turn.
Thank you. Okay, well, this Friday, June 23rd, we have a conference that's specifically for widows and widowers, for those who have survived the death process. And what it is a conference for people to get together. We have keynote speakers, we have breakout sessions, we have opportunities to get to know other widows in your community. It's so helpful to have people who understand this time of life and what you've been through. It's really helpful in your grief process and in your healing process to be able to talk about your spouse, talk about your experience. So we want to provide that for widows and widowers in our community. And like I said, it's this Friday from 9 to 4 in Hillsboro, Oregon. And we have more information about that at our website, which is affairsinorder.com. /Life After Loss conference.
We attended a conference where after Dave and Kris passed away, which is actually where Katie and I met. And it was just a very instrumental part of our journey of healing. And not only the information that was shared with us through the speakers and the keynote speakers and the breakout sessions, but just the connections that we made, like Katie said, with other people that have been down that path of widowhood. And it just gave us strength. It gave us inspiration and motivation to just power through the hardships and the grief and the challenges that we were facing after having lost our spouses. And so even though this is a little bit outside the realm of what our Prepare Your Affairs business is, we had an opportunity to host this event. We had one of our municipalities here was promoting a grant program that would support programs like this to help those with isolation or loneliness challenges. And so we pitched this idea to them, and they loved it. They absolutely fell in love with it. And so here we are, just a couple of days away from hosting our first one. And if it all goes well and we get a good response, we may look at continuing to do this. And if somebody's wherever you are, if you don't see or hear about this kind of a conference where you're at and want to host one, get in touch with us. Maybe we can help you put something together in your community.
We're writing a book.
We're writing a book
about our experience and about the experience of other widows, particularly in the realm of being prepared or not being prepared and how it affects your ability to grieve and your ability to move on. So we're hoping to finish that at the end of the year. We're hoping to start a podcast in the next couple of months so that we can get more information like this out. There's two things that I wanted to mention before we wrap up. And I think it's so very, very important to get your advance directive. If you do nothing else, if you do absolutely nothing else, do this one thing. Download it from every state has the opportunity, whether it's through your hospital, your doctor, you can just download it off the internet, your state's advance directive. And all it is being able to tell, it's your choices of how you want your body to be treated in the event of an accident or something. So nobody else has to make those decisions for you. Those are very difficult decisions to make in an emergency. So please make those decisions for yourself. Also, be a nice person now because you are going to need a lot of help. Widowhood and grieving, it's really hard to do on your own. So do your best to have some sort of community, tribe, clan, whatever, of people that you trust that can help you. Another huge part of my particular healing was having people who were willing to take calls and tell the story and, screen people. And, a lot of people want to be able to help. What can I do? What can I help you with? Guess what? I don't have the bandwidth to tell you that. I don't even know what day it is. So have people who are willing to organize that and help you with that. That saved me 100%. So I tell people a lot, just be a good person now. Yes, you are going to rely on your friends, and maybe be a helper for somebody else first. And you'll be surprised at how those people will be willing to come back and help you.
Great advice. Thanks for sharing that. Be a good person now. Oh, I try to be. Like you, I am a huge advocate for advanced care directives. In New York State, we have something called the MOLST form, MOLST, Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And it is one of the most detailed advanced directives I think I've ever seen. It goes right down to if you have a terminal illness and you acquire an infection, do you want to be treated with antibiotics or not?
Right.
It's that specific. And as you might have guessed, my mother, of course, had hers filled out. Now, it happened that I worked at the same nursing home she resided in as she neared the end of her life. So my days were very stressful in that I was going from leading a meeting one moment to getting a phone call from the unit she was on saying, your mom's having some delirium. Can you come help calm her down? So I was back and forth, changing hats like that. So at least to have those advanced care directives laid out when there was something that needed a decision, they would still come to me and say, here's what's going on. This is what her MOLST form says. What do you want to do? But it was just so easy for me to say, this is what she wanted. I know this is what she wanted. I have seen decisions like this literally tear families apart.
Absolutely.
I continue to work in hospice in some different capacities. And truly, I have seen siblings at each other's throats over these decisions that were not already made. So part of being nice is to take care of these things. We also talk on our podcast about self-care. This is a form of self-care.
It really is.
And you are helping others be able to take care of themselves as well by having the confidence in knowing that you've already made that decision. All they have to do is carry out your wishes.
Yeah.
So, very sadly, the time has come. The 30-minute episode is great because most of our demographic, we think, listens in the car. Right. Taking kids to school, to athletic activities, on their way to or from work. So 30 minutes works just great for that. But boy, sometimes you just get started in a conversation and you really like to dig in. There's so much more we could cover. But for today, we're going to say that's it today. Suffice it to say, listeners, that this couple, Corey and Katie, are just getting started. They've got these things already set up. This time it's a conference for widows and widowers. A year from now, might be a conference for kids. Who knows? Their podcast. Who knows? The sky's the limit. So this is a great time for you to reach out to them, connect to them, and you will be ready with everything that they decide to do that could help you along the way. So, as always, their contact information website will be in the episode notes and also on our website. I encourage you to reach out to them and find out what it is they're doing. Probably you're not going to make the conference this time, but very possibly the next one you can. Or, as they've invited, maybe you want to help get one going in your area, and they've invited you to reach out to them, and maybe they can help you get started. For now, I'll sign off. And I'll say, wherever in the world you are, take care of yourselves. Catch you next week as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.